Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hard4Games channel. We are your hosts. I'm Tony.
And I'm John.
Today we are taking a look at a PlayStation 3 reference tool. It is the DECR-1000A. It is a beast of a machine at 40 pounds.
18 kilos.
That's, yeah, and it sold for $10,000 when it was released by Sony to developers. So big thank you to local collector Nick for lending this to us, and let's go ahead and get started.
This is Hard4Games. They're Hard4Games. They become hard. They're Hard4Games.
The DECR-1000A Reference Tool was, in practice, mostly utilized by companies for game development. In fact, this one was owned by Disney Interactive Studios, and there's a little label on it, and we actually have both the original box and the box it was shipped in with the individual's, like the employee's name on it, that it was shipped to. Of course, we're not going to be showcasing those details.
But we are going to be showing where they live.
Yes.
And pictures of their family.
That's correct. So John mentioned a replacement reference tool. That was the 1400A. And that looks a lot more like an actual PlayStation 3.
Yeah, for those of you who have seen Metal Jesus's video about his, test, basically it would look exactly like that PlayStation 3, but instead of the PlayStation 3 test, it would say PlayStation 3 tool.
Yeah.
That's about all the difference. I mean, there's
in terms of
more
the exterior,
interior, but externally, it doesn't look like something out of 2001. It just looks like a PlayStation 3.
Yeah. So speaking of the size and shape of this thing, it was meant to be rack mountable, or at least that was an option. We do have a stand where you could place it vertically, but I think a lot of people just probably rack mounted it and sort of called it a day.
It would be kind of cool to have it vertically mounted. But at the same time, I'm worried anything would ever tip it over, in which case it would generate so much force it would simply smash through the table, and then that falling debris would smash through the floor, into the foundation, punch straight through the soft earth below it, continue past the earth's crust and straight into the mantle.
Yes. And then it would go to China, and they would not like that because of their, anti-video game laws. Plus, you don't want to give them that kind of technology.
I don't know. It might be like it's going home. I'm pretty sure it was probably built at Foxconn.
True.
FurryCon,
Foxconn, whatever.
So you can see on our massive tool that we have, as one would expect, a Blu-ray drive, an array of status lights here, power button, and, reset button, network and system initialization, or init, which is, it's for the network and system, isn't it? So, general purpose output, general purpose input. There are dip switches and status indicator lights for many little features that I don't know the foggiest thing about. So, I'm not going to touch any of them because I don't want to break something that isn't mine. I wouldn't even want to break something if it was mine. So, let's flip them around a little. Next up, we have, you might remember these from the original backwards compatible PlayStation, the Compact Flash, the Memory Stick Duo, remember that garbage format? And the SD and Mini SD ports. Those were under that little flip top thing, you might remember those. So you can see these two drive ports, which have hot swappable drives in them. And there's nice little eject buttons for them and little status indicators on there. This would mostly be the firmware you're working with, operating system, all that fun stuff. Whereas this one you could use for Blu-ray emulation and such. Kind of like an NPDP, which is nice that you wouldn't have to endlessly be like, okay, you've changed 3 lines of code, burn me another disk. Oh, it was a bad burn. Burn me another disk. Oh, that one didn't quite burn right. Burn me another disk. It could just be like, I pop this out, I take it to somebody, they flash the new thing on there, and then I just pop this back. And you could write many of them at once if you had the right tools. And, well, I'm pretty sure we all know about these USBs, which, good God, do I wish there were this many USBs on the actual PlayStation, because they only had 4 on the starting retail unit, and later on, just 2. which was frustrating, to say the least. And now the strangest part of all of this, the foot switch, which was a switch operated by your foot. But why would you want a switch operated by your foot? So that your foot has something to switch. Okay, it was for core dumps, which is like, you know, you're debugging, you come across a glitch, you press it, and it's basically like status and information and memory related to what just happened, dumped. Then you can just copy that off to something, take it to the relevant people, whoever was coding that bit, and be like, well, here's what screwed up, and they can get some idea. That's not at all uncommon for games, testing, development, all that sort of stuff. And it's actually kind of cool that, like, as soon as you're playing or fiddling around, something goes wrong, just twitch with your foot, got it. Got it. You didn't have to drop, you didn't have to press anything else, you didn't have to do anything, you got it immediately. Whether or not time was actually relevant. Don't think it takes much to explain what a main power switch does. You'll remember the PS3 original versions did have a nice big switch like that, kind of like the big PlayStation 2s. The power cable the PlayStation 3 used is the same used here. The AV multi-out, which every PlayStation from the original up to the 3 used, which I believe they ditched on the PlayStation 4. To be honest, I don't own one. A dedicated VGA out, which is pretty nifty, but seems about par for a development unit. We've also got 2 HDMI outs. Later firmware did not actually support the second one because they were at one point planning on originally having 2 HDMI outs from the PlayStation 3, but eventually ditched the idea. The digital output that everybody has on their TVs and stuff that virtually no one really uses. It's pretty rare unless you have a tuner you're hooking into. But hey, if you're testing stuff, why not? We've got a LAN and some other like little connectivity ports there. Looks like Cat5. We've got the antenna plug for the Bluetooth antenna. And this is a part I quite like. The analog audio out is just a little like headphone jack, but there are 4 of them, which I thought was pretty cool. And there also happens to be the dev LAN, which would be to connect basically directly to your computer network interfacing with your development software. So at the last little bit here is a serial port, which, I don't know, might have been used for servicing or something like that, but is covered so that you won't faff about with it. Which is kind of a shame, just covering it. It makes it so tempting, so tantalizing. What could be behind there? Is Earthbound 64 secretly inside of this port? Get me a hammer. So here we have our Bluetooth antenna. You'll recognize this little port, which sort of just plug in there. Not going to do that right now because it looks fragile. I don't want to break it. But thankfully, they put a nice little suction cup on there. So if there just so happens to be a nice, better spot, you could just, you could stick that thing anywhere. You could just stick it on like that if you so wanted. And then we have several power supply plugs. This one is for Oceania. As you can see, it's got that, like, almost looks like the faces in Mischief Makers. This one is for the UK with that big UK plug. Almost kind of looks like our appliance plugs that we have here. There's the dual prong Korean plug. Ooh, that's another dual prong. Now this one's for the rest of Europe. We've got some mounting hardware bits, which, oh, wait. I believe it's like a ferrite bead. Mm-hmm. And they're used for, I believe it's preserving, like, signal quality. So I think you'd, like, put, like, an HDMI and you'd clip this over it. You'll see it on a lot of Sony's AV cables and stuff. I'm not going to fiddle with this one because it's completely unbent and unused. and I'd rather just leave it in the very, very nice condition it's in. As you can see here, we've got in its bag, this is the vertical stand. If for some reason you decided this laying like this was just simply taking up too much room, you could attach it to this boy right here, and you would now have a vertical standing unit, which I assume would be nice, but to be honest, it kind of terrifies me, vertically standing a unit this heavy. Also, be nice if that was a little bit longer, a little bit wider too. Does not fill me with a lot of hope that it will not suddenly just smash over, destroying itself and losing me and my company $10,000. So we've got this beautiful boy, so I kept thinking, I'd really like to see what's inside. I see all these tantalizing little views through these grates that seems to have a honeycomb behind it. So I took off the 3 screws here and, well, let's just take a look. Okay, so it's like any other computer case of the time. And it likes to catch a little, and oh, look at that. Magnificent. You can see just everything in here. Just look at that. And it isn't completely obscured by shielding or whatever the hell all of this is. But, hey, very thoughtful of them to give a little handle to the power supply should you ever need to unscrew and replace it. I actually wish they did that on real computers.
You're saying it's not a real computer?
Well, I mean, it technically is a computer, but it's not like a personal computer or
So
something
you
like
meant you wish they did that on personal computers.
Well, yeah, then I'm going to get people who are, well, my Mac.
Mac, you can't open a Mac, silly.
Well, with a hammer.
A Mac. So the internals, we're actually not going to dismantle this one, but our good friend developer Jeff did send some images to showcase to all of you. So these are like 99.9% the internals. These images are actually from his prototype version of this, because it's developer Jeff. Of course he has a prototype because he's like a crazy PlayStation collector. But he tells
developer.
And developer.
And Jeff.
And a Jeff. But he says these are essentially exactly the same. Like there's like a little minutia of difference, but for the average person, it's not going to be different enough to even notice. So booting this thing up here, you can see that it's pretty much the PlayStation 3. And
we've seen it before.
We've seen it before, and the debug features here are largely the same as the debug features that we showcased in our Prodigy Target Manager / PS3 debug functionality video, which I'll put a link in the description and a card above here. Here they are. I could go through them again, but since they're so similar, there's kind of no point in repeating myself. Watch the other video if you're interested, but suffice to say, they exist on this machine, and that's kind of all we want to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, they're all dev tools. They're going to have a lot of overlap.
Yeah.
You know, this one might be more focused on one part of it, but it's still going to have a lot of the features of some of the other ones.
Yeah, so it's kind of super redundant. So thank you again to local collector Nick for lending us this behemoth, and also lending us some other items that we're going to be covering very soon, including a PS2 test system, a PSP development system, and a pretty cool joystick as well.
It's like, you know, that 90s, late 90s era where every single PC just used a joystick. It was what everyone played on. It was one of like the prototypes you'd send to a lab for certification. So they needed to be able to like look through and see how all the mechanisms work. So it's like that same sort of transparent plastic they made like prison TVs out of.
It's pretty neat.
It's really cool.
So stick around. We have more PlayStation and PC stuff coming up. Thank you all again for watching, supporting us on Patreon, ringing the bell, subscribing, all that stuff. And we'll see y'all next time.
Games. It's a hot